It's Good Shows Leafs Hour, presented by Drive Auto Group, fueled by customer expectations. I'm JD Bunkis. It is a Monday. So I got Justin Bourne here from Hockey Central and The Breakdown. How's it going, buddy?
It's going good. It's going good. Today's a good day.
What does it say about me that the only times I want you to break something down are when they're bad plays?
You know what's interesting, actually, that you say that, is like when I used to do systems analyst posts in my writing, it was always the bad plays. It was like, you know, I can tell you where this went wrong. But here at Sportsnet, I've been doing the breakdowns, and it's been of good plays.
Yeah.
Breaking down good plays is very hard because it's like, he did a good.
Wow, they did great.
He did a good there.
One of your breakdowns was like, look at Austin Matthews make this pass. This pass is hard. He does it. I can't even explain it. I was like, wow, we're paying this guy for this content.
We brought in the expert to be like, holy, you should try that. It's super duper hard.
I could also do that. I could also not explain things for money.
Well, but like, what do you want me to say? Like,
I don't know.
I used the analogy of that pass. It was like walking down an up escalator. That's brilliant.
I really, really do love our conversations because I do find myself a lot of times trying to accept what I don't know about sports and trying to get a better explanation as to why something happens the way that it does. Whether it's a breakdown, whether, you know, you and I actually just spent a long text message thread just last week discussing the differences between being dumb and lazy and how those two interconnect, where they actually share pieces on the Venn diagram versus where they actually separate. And I love stuff like that.
I am dumb enough to be lazy.
Yeah. I think that being lazy is a form of being dumb.
By the way, we were talking about it in context of hockey players.
Yes. And I think you can probably guess which one. If you're a regular listener of this program, you could probably like read between the lines on that whole situation. So I do want to kind of start with that, which is things I don't really understand and things that my dumb brain tries to give me it's the Occam's razor thing, right? Where you're not supposed to load up and you're not supposed to add something to what is supposed to be a simple explanation. And to me and my dumb brain, when I watched those games over the weekend against the Ottawa Senators and against the Buffalo Sabres, two of the lesser lights of the NHL, like Ottawa's leading scorer is Connor Brown.
Yeah.
Who would have played on Toronto's?
Is that true? I didn't know that.
He would have played on Toronto's fourth line this year. Maybe the third line for some stretches, right?
Right, for sure.
He was a guy that when he played with Austin Matthews, one of the most gifted hockey players on the planet, people were apoplectic about it, saying that, why are you playing him with, as we lovingly called him in my circle of friends, a chopper? Why are you playing him with a chopper?
He's a very good chopper.
He's a very good chopper, but he is a chopper.
Okay.
They go into Buffalo, and it's in front of this incredible, like both those games are just, I would think, the perfect atmosphere for a hockey team where you're on the road and yet there's more fans in the stands for your team than the other one, that it would just be such a boon that when you score, it's loud in their building and just deflate the other team. And that really they should be the ones that are kind of easily defeated from a, I don't know, mental standpoint or an effort standpoint. And yet my Occam's razor, dumb brain, watches both these games and just thinks, well, they just didn't have enough effort. And I don't know if that's true. And if it isn't true, why do I keep feeling this way?
Okay, those are good questions. One thing I want to take away from what you just said is to everyone who ever calls Sportsnet Leafsnet or anything else, let that be a lesson, their weekend where they went into Ottawa and into Buffalo and sold out those buildings. And it's like, why is there more Leafs content than there is whatever other
Just
content?
look at population. Just Google population of Canada, then population of Ontario.
Right.
You will have your answer. And then time zones.
Back to the dumb or lazy comment. I'd say it's just lazy to not look into why it would be like that. However, yes, I understand that sentiment. I think that comes from feeling like that push you saw at the start of the third period from the Leafs against the Sabres, which was tiny. It was small. But there was a moment where you're like, oh, like, right. When the Leafs, when they go like this, that's the Leafs. So when you see it not like that for a long time, it's really easy to be like, I mean, is the effort just not there? They just not giving her? I think that's fair. And I think we're also at the time of the season where if a guy is going to take a night off, before the season schedule, and I said to you, point at the part of the schedule where guys take nights off, you'd be like, oh, God, like, I don't know, mid-February after the All-Star break, like in Ottawa or something. You'd be like, yeah, that's it. But I think you're right in the Occam's razor front that, maybe that's one explanation and it is a simple one and it could be right. On the other hand, I think an even simpler one is one that I think that you're going to be mad at me for saying is like
they're sick and they played a lot of games.
Yeah,
sure.
I know that sucks, but like it might be reality.
No, it is, and I think that I can hear that.
Yeah.
There's some people who hear that and they just want to pull their hair out and say, well, that shouldn't be a factor, blah, blah, blah.
Coaches in particular, like, no, we're not doing that.
This is my only pushback to this. It's one thing if you're the Bruins or the Lightning or the Capitals or the Penguins.
Sure.
And this happens, that you have a stretch of games, a couple of games where you look this way and let's say, again, I don't like saying effort because it seems so lame to put it that way. Like, these guys aren't trying. Obviously they are, right? This isn't what I'm trying to get at. But there's something missing, right? Like, we can see this, and they shouldn't be outshot by these groups this way. They shouldn't get hemmed in the third period, being asked Jack Campbell to stand on his head. They shouldn't be asking Freddie Anderson to be performing that way through 2 periods and then say, well, 30 seconds of the game and we blew it, right?
I just want to footnote your point that hockey effort, look at playoffs and that different level of effort, it is there. There is another reserve. Carry on.
Right. And that's all, is that I get it. I hear that excuse and I'm willing to live with this. It's just that when you have more examples of, or when you have so many examples of play like this, it's harder to just say, hey, well, let's ignore that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just been a really strange year, right? Like I feel like we saw these games early in the season with Babcock, and it was like, all right, has something happened here with the team's motivation level? Then they bring Keefe in and things change and they're healthy and they go on a run and things look great. But yeah, there is the pileup of the season is real and it is long. And also, I think you'll hear a lot of people say that when you're a rookie or a young guy or someone new to taking on these sort of big moments or big minutes, the season grind catches up to you. And I think the core of the Leafs, the most important part of their engine, is younger and is playing as Austin Matthews. I mean, this is definitely the most games he's ever played. I don't even know if he's missed. So he's played the most amount of games.
Marner's missed a bunch of games, though, and Nylander just missed some with the flu, and I don't know how long it's going to take him to get right.
I just feel like the engine looks like it's a little low battery light is on right now and needs a plug-in. But that's something, too, that I think that Sheldon Keefe might be learning. And I was thinking this morning, is that he's a new coach. And one thing that I know about him from the American Hockey League is that there is no game he won't grind to win. And we've seen games where he played, was it on Saturday that he played the guys like 27 minutes, like Marner and Matthews played like 27 minutes?
Well, yeah, and you just look at the way that he's employing the blue line, which is Timothy Liljegren is basically playing less than 10 minutes a night. Against Ottawa, I think he got up to 11, which is his career high.
Right, so there's no game that Keefe will not grind to win. He will call a timeout up 5-2. He will stretch out his guys. He will do whatever it takes every single night. And I do believe that that's the best way to get points and very important to this team.
Agree. Trying to win is the best way to win, I would say.
You know what? That's just one man's take.
Wow.
But a lot of coaches would say.
I get it.
Well, and I believe Mike Babcock said once about a Connor McDavid coached hockey or led hockey team. He said, you know, when you look at that guy playing 25 minutes, you sit back and you kind of smile because you're going to have them in the third period or whatever. So there are coaches who say you can't play your top guys that much. You can't grind every game. It's a long season. It's going to pay or cost you in the third period. It's going to cost you in a long season. So Keefe has never coached in the NHL. Maybe his thought on grinding like this will change. Maybe he'll think in years to come, boy, I can't stretch those guys that thin because come February and March and that push, we're not going to have the gas.
I am so glad you went here, because this is something I really wanted to hit on today, is a couple of things. One is we used to parse what Mike Babcock said to the media because we always said that that's how he is in part coaching. Yeah. And we've now had a couple of times where they've had bad losses and Keefe has said something that's pretty interesting. Like we had the one where I think it was the game you and I watched together right before the break, the Chicago game, where he said there's a lack of maturity with this group. Yeah. And then we had last night this quote from him. Quote, "To me, it was pretty apparent from about the 10-minute mark of the first period on that we didn't have it today. So frankly, I was a little stunned that we had the surge we did to start the third just because it just didn't seem we had it today." What do you, like, is that anything? We play a game on the show. Is this anything?
Yeah.
I read that quote and said, that to me seems like what Babcock used to do, which is, it's, again, I'm interpreting it through, I watched it and then I read it. And reading it always seems harsher. When he said it, it didn't seem as harsh. He goes on to basically say he's impressed by the start of the third, blah, blah, blah. But it seemed actually like him sliding in a bit of a, like, I don't want to say passive aggressive, but an undertone of, I can't believe you guys played with just no effort for basically only 10 minutes in this game.
Yeah, let this be a teaching point moment for how you consume Sheldon Keefe news. One is that passive aggressive is on the books. That's a thing. That's real. He will employ that as a I won't call it a strategy or a tool so much as a behavior. That's one thing that he does and sometimes is passive aggressive. The other thing is he is not beholden to cliches. And in hockey, that is rare. Like every coach I've ever had will come in and tell you one of 3 reasons that went wrong that they blame every game on. And that is the thing I really respect Sheldon for the most is that he goes into every game almost with a blank slate, and he will find out that individual game's cause. And same with and I've said this to you before about like the way he runs practice. Most coaches have a book of their drills and they pick their drills for the day. He goes in and says, what do we need to work on? Whiteboard, pen, and he makes a drill up that like works on this part of the game. So he's very open-minded in that way. And you're going to hear this after games where he says creative, original, okay. So when you're saying with his quotes, is it nothing or is it something or is it anything?
Is it anything?
It's often something. This would definitely be something. We didn't have it today. Would be a message to the group that, I'm guessing that he knows they have it, that they're better than that that's not what this team is and how they should, they shouldn't say like, well, I guess this is what we are, because that's not what this Leafs team is. Could have been just frustration on his part, and that's where the passive aggressiveness comes in, but I do think definitely qualifies as something.
I just know that without naming the name of the player, I've heard a story once about a guy who used to just start games and say, I don't have it today. Yeah. And it's it's not a great thing to hear that from a guy.
Yeah.
And when I hear a coach say that, I would have to imagine that that's a common thing among some types of players, the I don't have it today guy, which is not exactly what you'd be thrilled about as a coach. Yeah. So when you say that about your entire group, it seems like a pretty strong shot.
How many times would you try to turn over a car if the battery's dead?
Yeah.
You're like, as a guy, you turn it over, like, no. Yeah. By the 3rd time, you're like, I'm going to stop trying. I don't have it today. Like, this thing is not going. Actually, as a player, that was me. I'd give myself about 3 cracks, and after that,
you're just done.
Ride up the string here.
The second Keefe thing I wanted to discuss is what you just said there, the grinding it out element. Because I'm a little torn on something now, or at least I think it needs to be considered, which is the Leafs have been burning out in some third periods. They burnt out against the Ducks. So this is they have 1 regulation win in their last 6.
Last 9.
What, last 9?
Yeah.
Okay, see, I only went 6 back.
Yeah.
So 1 regulation win in their last 9. That seems not great.
It's not good, no.
And it seems especially not great because they've looked slow and they've looked sloppy in some third periods. Correct. And now you've also got a bad third period against the Senators combined with a really flat performance in a back-to-back where your goaltenders played well in both games. So the old save percentage thing gets kicked out the door, right? Yeah. The Leafs are playing well. It's a bad save percentage narrative, I think, is kind of gone. If you point to the raw numbers, everyone's going to tell you that the increase in minutes has been great. Austin Matthews might score 60 goals this season, right? And William Nylander's headed for career highs. All these guys' uptick in numbers are obvious. Like, it's impossible to debate these things.
Right.
But do we at least need to consider the idea that maybe these guys are playing far too many minutes and that there is a cumulative effect here that is going to cost them in third periods and on back-to-backs, that this type of a performance, that third period, is this causation or is this, correlation without causation? How do you interpret that?
Well, that's tough. That's tough. And I bet that's something that internally they're trying to sort out too. But the problem is, like, you've already been playing these guys as much as you're playing them. And, like, is it going to make much of a difference if you dial back their minutes at this point? I'm just saying, like, we can talk about it in terms of digesting what's happened. Like, it could be descriptive, or we could, if you're a coach, you're trying to figure out how do we operate going forward? What is the predictive side of this? And I imagine at this point, they're so desperate for points that they are going to have to put themselves in a situation where they wring every last drop out of this team to get in, which you know what that means about their chances in playoffs against a Tampa Bay or a Boston, quite frankly, more likely a Boston.
Yay.
Right. So the way this situation has unfolded has left me in a position where I don't believe that the Leafs are going to be able to represent themselves as well as they could, barring getting back Mikheyev, Janssen, and Riley all at the start of playoffs, and all of a sudden everyone is fresh/rusty.
Yeah, but even then, there's an excuse you can point to.
Right.
If these guys didn't have their legs underneath them, if they go well, if they play well, they were fresh. If they lose, they were rusty. It's tough.
This is
Narratives are easy to draw.
Yeah, and this is, this is sports analysis in general. Like who is immune from this sort of thing in a season? No team. Every team goes through these ups and downs, but the way it is situated right now, it's tough to see a scenario where the Leafs are at full power when they need to be.
No, they're not going to be. It's not even hard to be. See, it's not happening, period. Even if they do get those guys back, when we're talking about who's fresh and who's rusty, like some of these guys are going to be overworked. I don't think Tyson Barrie was ever designed to play 27 minutes in a game. I don't think that's his purpose. I really don't. I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't think that you're supposed to be leaning. We'll talk about this later, but some guys are getting leaned on far too much right now. That's pretty clear. And I would say that just about everyone on their blue line is either playing too much or doing too much or being asked to do more than they really should be. Yeah. Like that's basically what's happening here. There's a real strain on that group. I'm just saying that it was really looked at as this unequivocal win for this coaching staff, that they were playing guys more, that they were playing the stars more, that they were upping the minutes, and this is all good and great. And I'm not convinced it isn't. I just think it's a fair question to raise saying, okay, they obviously had a sports science department that was working hand in hand with Babcock. Were there things that I think times, especially late in games where Babcock didn't put on his best lines or his best players or get a little bit more creative as Keith has, where he stacks the groups and really tries to press for a goal? Of course, I'm not trying to validate all the decisions by Mike Babcock, but it's just that it's pretty clear that the former coaching staff and a lot of people around the game were dubious about how many minutes Austin Matthews could play. We talked about it before.
Yeah.
We were dubious about the workload of some of these dudes and how they were going to respond to it. And that just because the overall numbers are there, I'd like to know exactly, like this is why the player tracking stuff would actually be so interesting to me. The data that they actually accumulate is what are the numbers for some of these guys when it gets later after they've been in a game where they're playing once they hit the 20-minute mark.
What's funny is when we've talked about the introduction of player tracking, I've been like, I don't know what player speed is ever going to do for me. People, like of all the different things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like at this time of year, like are these guys max speeds what their max speeds were, or is the drop off more significant on this group? I assume league wide the drop off is there.
Yeah.
One thing right now too.
Lengths of shifts, all these things, just what ends up happening. It just reminds me of, when a pitcher comes back from an injury or it's a young arm that's a power arm, and basically you hear this from organizations that we're going to monitor. Yeah. And we're not just monitoring pitch count, we're monitoring things like fatigue, and that they really take these things into account. Or if you just look at the way that Giannis Antetokounmpo is handled in the NBA, Giannis comes out at specific times. They sit him. They are diligent with the way that they employ him. And I know the games are vastly different in terms of like what they can do and get away with. And the Leafs need, like you said, they need to play their best players more right now. Yeah. It's just that...
Particularly as a top-heavy team, by the way, this is more important that they're able to.
Right.
Sorry to jump on your...
No, but it's true. I'm just saying that the idea that there doesn't have any consequence to playing these guys all of a sudden 4 or 5 more minutes than they've been accustomed to for the last 2 seasons seems like a little foolish to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a worthwhile point. And I do think that just the way... when you have a roster that's constructed so top heavy, this is going to be a concern is like, okay, you need to lean more on the dollars in your lineup, but can the dollars handle, that type of minutes? And we're getting to that point in the season. I think, if you're a statistically inclined person listening to us talk right now, you'd point like number drop off has not been significant for the Stars.
But that's what I mean. Context matters to me when it comes to numbers.
Yeah,
I'm sick of just seeing numbers and just saying, okay, we're picking and choosing this game report versus this is a 5-game thing versus this is the season and we're including Babcock stuff. This is the key stuff. It's just getting harder and harder to interpret these things and say, well, it's not harder to interpret them. I just think that a lot of people use stats in a way that it's like the Michael Moore stuff. Not to get political here, but when I was a kid, I used to read Michael Moore. I think I was in grade 11. I'm looking at all these things. I'm saying, wow, this is incredible. How could someone do this? Or any politician, when they put out the numbers they want you to see, that a lot of people, numbers don't lie, quote unquote, but you can use numbers to manipulate a narrative. For sure. And you can be selective with what you use and how you use it.
This is a debate I've had my entire media career in writing.
Yeah.
Because like if you're trying to make an argument, you can find data. You can put clips and video clips in particular, like, look at this guy, 3 times the turnover. And if you want to grab the bad stuff.
I've done this before where I've looked for numbers to support what I'm seeing with my eyes.
Yeah.
And then if it happens, I've picked ones out that have been like, and it's just a natural thing to do where you go like, look at this. Yeah. And then the other ones where they don't match it, you're like, well, I guess that's one's irrelevant. Like this one, I guess doesn't say anything. It's like, huh? No. So
well, this is actually interesting. When talking to the analytics departments of the Maple Leafs, when I was involved, I wanted to do, I'm a little bit ambitious and I like to work my way up and be involved in as many different things as I can. So I wanted to be involved with them. And I asked them about a catch-all stat. Like, would it be, could we do something where we have some sort of a war for baseball or, can hockey have a version of that? And, their point was just that so many of these things wash each other out. Like, if you're looking for a great offensive player who is a bad defensive player who comes out as that washes out as an average player, just that's a very general thing. It doesn't tell you what you need to know. You need to know the details about where they're good and where they're bad and where they're, and so when we go through individual players, much like a hockey team, taking any stat without all of the things is not really doing it justice. So yeah, you can certainly pick and choose what you like. And if you wanted to, then the example I just used, you could hold up a player as a great offensive player or a bad defensive player, depending on the narrative you're trying to spin. But, the player at the end of the day is a wash. You need to know the information. And for that, you need 2 and 3 hour radio programs to dig in.
I also just think that, baseball is, okay, it's a batter versus pitcher, and he's going to get up at least 3 times a game.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Right.
Like, what? That's it. Like, that's what you have to break down.
Yes.
Did he hit it? Did he get a walk? Did he strike out?
Yeah.
Where did he hit it to? Okay, got it. How hard did he hit it?
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. It's hard to overcomplicate some of these things.
Yeah.
Even basketball is like, okay, he knocks down shots from here at what %?
Yeah.
He does it when he's like, we now have contested and uncontested shots. These things are, again, a lot easier to measure. Hockey is, every time I watch it and every time I try to listen to some of the numbers anyways, that try to account for certain things that we're seeing, I'm like, yeah, but this is missing from that. And how do you equate for this? Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to overall effectiveness of minutes, is that I think on a whole, it's probably showing it's working. What I want to know is, what about the different contexts, especially later in games, and how that operates? So